Well, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Spivey, and I'm the professor of your Intro to Sociology 1020 online. It's great to be here with you, and as I may have stated in a recent email, I do try to provide some online, these short web lecturettes, I call them. They're not extensive, but at least I can help give you some insights for individual students. If you have particular questions about some of the concepts as we go through the chapters, you simply send me an email, and I'll try to answer your particular questions. Students have various individual questions about concepts and their meanings and shades of meanings that may vary from one student to the next. But in these little lecturettes, I just give you a brief overview and some of the main points to consider, or areas to think about for the exam. Um, this first chapter is sort of an introduction to the discipline of sociology, where it originated from with the emergence of the Industrial Revolution. Basically, it focuses on some of the core underlying assumptions about the discipline as we go through the rest of the semester. So it starts out just looking over the core concepts area, and I think this is an important area for you to, once you read your chapters, is to go back to your core concepts area, visual sum your core concepts at the end of each chapter. That gives you a summation. They'll be very, very helpful. Of course, you also have to always, when it comes test time, to go back to your concepts and areas I tell you to study a little more. I do give you an overview of the exams before we take them. But in this first chapter, introducing sociology, one thing I like to stress is the students are more maybe familiar with psychology than they are with sociology, and there's some reasons for that. Psychology, the basic unit of analysis for psychology is the individual. So psychologists are more interested in the internal personality development and psychological mental disorders, perceptions, imagination, this kind of thing, focused on the individual to find out what makes people tick. So most students think that psychology helps us to explain what makes people tick. Well, sociology, originating more in Europe, European perspective, though we do have some American theories like the symbolic interactionist perspective. It also is interested in what makes people think, and I want you to be able to pick up on this notion as we go through the semester, that each of these chapters are really looking at what makes people tick, what motivates people's behavior. Does it originate within the individual, or is it more a process of being socialized into certain groups and utilizing our cultural knowledge and learning to adapt to situations? So that what motivates our behavior in the end is actually outside of ourselves. It's not just in our minds, given to us at birth. It comes from the outside, and we are socialized into our society's norms and values and beliefs, as we'll see as we go in the next few chapters. So we are interested in what makes the individual tick. It's just we have a different orientation to answer that question. It does not originate in the individual. It originates from society. So, for example, sociologists are interested in studying the large macro phenomenon of our social fact of social class background. So social class, what kind of family were you born into? Were they working class folks? No one in the family had ever been to college, all maybe high school graduates or even high school dropouts. Live in a working class community, maybe a rural community? Or were you born in a professional family? Both parents were college educated, maybe even graduate trained, graduate professionals, doctors, lawyers, professors, uh, and even business people, right? Business owners who have had the college experience, who have the the economic capital as well as what we call social capital to motivate a young person to go through college and are expected to finish college and be a professional themselves, for example. Also, we know that so for example, in understanding an individual, sociologists, for the most part, would say we would not really have to sit down and interview an individual's life entirely. Tell us what social class you were born into, what kind of neighborhood, what was the income of your family, what's the educational levels of the family, and then from that we can infer a lot about the individual. Things like your aspirations in terms of a career. It can tell us a lot about your religious beliefs. It can tell us a lot about your political affiliations and outlooks. Uh, just by knowing your social class background, there will be not every, it won't tell us everything, but it'll tell us a lot about your values, the kind of norms you may have, beliefs. And it's those norms, which are our social expectations, beliefs, and values that motivate our behavior. And we know that that will vary from one social class background to another, placing some groups in an advantageous position in society. For others, it's going to put you at a disadvantage. Um, so that's just one example, and we're going to be looking at many others that show that it's the individual. What makes our individual outlook, what motivates our behavior, is really not coming from the inside. And even though we may experience it as such, but that the influence, where we got those norms, where do we get these beliefs? Why do we wear the styles of clothes we wear? Where do we get these political opinions? They weren't there in the beginning, so they come from somewhere, and that somewhere is in the social surrounding which we grow up in, the social context. This is what sociology is very interested in studying. Our basic unit of analysis is the groups. The small group is two or more people interacting together. From that level, from that ground level, all the way up to community studies, our communities, our neighborhoods, the institutions that we belong to, the clubs we belong to, the subcultures we engage in, all the way up to the national culture, to our national belonging, our nationality, our race and ethnic identities. All the way up to globalized world, the globalized world economy, the globalized cultural world system that we seem to be living in today. So all the way from that very macro level down to the micro level of just two people interacting. That's our basic unit of analysis. And all of that will show us or tell us or give us insights into what motivates people's behavior, what makes us do what we do. And as it says in the first core concept, sociologists focus on the social forces that shape human activity, and it looks at just the very things that I'm talking about. And then in the second core concept area, sociologist Peter L. Berger, he offers us a description of the sociological consciousness, that is the mindset of a sociologist. And this very famous line, which will be on the final exam, and most times students will forget this, but here's the answer if I was to ask you this in a true-false statement format. The first wisdom of sociology is this: things are not what they seem. That is, sociologists do not take things for granted when people, simply because politicians or any individual in any situation makes social claims. We're somewhat skeptical about, let's look at it closer. Let's really look at what's really going on behind the scenes. We know that in any society, its institutions, its political ideology is many times at the front, generally utilized to people to make an advantage for themselves or for their groups, or to put a good face on a good image, and sociologists are always weary of these kinds of ideological claims. We always want to look further and really find out what's going on. And the first wisdom of sociology, things are not what they seem. It kind of gets at the breakage between common sense, if you will, and scientific, the scientific nature of sociology. We use evidence like a scientist to do studies and then to get to the bottom of relationships in society. We do not base our science, our sociological understanding on common sense. Doesn't mean that common sense is a bad thing. Common sense is important for any society. If we didn't have common sense, we would be in a lot of trouble. We need common sense to a certain degree, but our common sense being handed down, through traditions and customs, can also have many blind spots, many biases in them, so that our common sense may be at many times correct, but many times our common sense can be way off base. And so sociology many times will check our common sense notions of things and show how it's related back to the society itself. And you're going to see many examples. So as we go through the semester, there's going to be various theories, chapters, concepts that you'll study that may go against the grain of your common sense. Some of them will support your common sense. You may say to yourself, "Oh, I knew that all along. Now I can see why I was correct about this, because here it is from sociological research showing this relationship," right? But then there'll be other areas that you thought things were otherwise in sociology. That's the campus 5 o'clock bell going off there. I'm right next door to campus here. But there'll be other things that will go against your common sense. And you'll think, wow, I didn't know that. For example, in terms of falling in love, we tend to fall in love with people from our same class background. We usually marry a person within 25 miles of our own home. So social class, the larger social fact, when you read in the text Durkheim's notion of social fact, the social fact are those existing patterns of society that impinge upon us, that are way beyond they're outside of ourselves. They're a social fact. They exist even though we can't see them. So one of those would be, for example, social class at the macro, larger level of society. Our class system, broken up between working class, middle class, upper class. There's very gradations of social class, but that's the basic outline. How that influences our love life, for example. Our choice of a mate. And as I was saying, the research generally shows that social class has a big impact on our love relationships. We tend to fall in love with people from the same class background, who in turn will tend to have the same kind of values. If you're from the working class, you have certain working class values and outlooks. And if you marry somebody from, say, a upper class family, they're going to have different outlook on life, different values, different norms of behavior, dress, manners. And if any of you have ever been in a relationship with somebody from a different class background, whether that relationship for you was going with somebody in a higher class or lower class than yourself, you know that it can bring about a lot of conflicts in terms of do's and don'ts of everyday life. And so it has a big impact on our love life, and has a big impact on many areas in what we would consider our personal lives that we will cover as we go through, especially the chapter on stratification. So sociology says that our behavior is very social in the end. And another thing that some students may not like about sociology is it says that for the most part, 99% of the time, we human beings, even though we think of ourselves as being highly individualistic, some kids will wear certain types of fashion design, and because it makes them stand out as an individual. When you think about it, there's millions and millions of other young people wearing the very same kind of clothing, same company. And you're just, you're really just conforming to the fashions of the time. You're not really standing out as an individual, even though commercials will try to talk to you as if you are standing out as an individual. Actually, just conforming your behavior as a consumer to buying products, and millions of other young people will be wearing the same kind of clothes you are, and maybe feeling very individualistic as well. But sociology tends to show that, after all, for the most part, we tend to conform to what society expects of us. And one of the, I always say to students at the beginning that a lot of what we're really going to be studying are, if we had to bring it down just to a couple of terms, I would say social expectations. What's expected of us in any given situation. And there will be norms of behavior that our culture has created that we're expected to conform to in any certain situation. And when we take those chances and do not conform, and we deviate, then we tend to get in trouble. We get some kind of social sanction, if you will, whether it's something, it's an informal sanction like disapproval, all the way to being put in jail, and at the worst case would be the death sentence, right? So in some sense, we're kind of locked in to a great degree. But that said, though, on the other hand, so we can say society determines a lot of what, how humans behave on a daily basis. But then on the other hand, we individuals have as the symbolic interactionist theorists will stress to us during the semester in our chapters, that we have the individual ability to say no to what's expected. That is, all of us deviate from what's expected many times on a daily basis. And after all, that's what makes us human. You can imagine a society where everybody's just saying yes to everything. It would be like puppets on a string, and we would be very robotic in our nature. Wouldn't be a lot of novelty going on, right? But in the end, human beings have the ability to deviate, to say no to what's expected of them. Sometimes that might be a negative deviation, and a person may pay consequences. Or maybe later it could be a positive deviation, or it could be seen as a negative deviation at the time. Take Martin Luther King, for example, the Civil Rights Movement. He was seen as very deviant and a criminal to some extent. But in the end, he brought about, the social movement brought about very positive social changes in society. All of that was based in people's willingness to deviate from what was expected of them. And we see this in many other areas of life, the women's movement, and in other various social movements. And on a daily basis, even at the very micro level, such as in the family or at work or in class, even in the classroom. There's always an ongoing always an ongoing negotiated phenomenon. It's not written in stone. But it's kind of like a chicken and egg kind of thing. Which came first, society or the individual? If you try to think that, what came first? Was it society and then individuals were socialized to live together? Or was it individuals that created society? And when you think about it, really, they both come together. It's what we call a dialectic. The individual and society arise together. They're both interrelated. And so it's individuals and our behaviors, norms, values, and beliefs are created through society, through interaction in society. And in turn, it's individuals that turn around and change society, change the norms, change the values and the beliefs. So we can say that sociology teaches us that a lot of our behaviors and daily experiences are already determined for us through social belonging, through being socialized into society. Then on the other end, there's a lot of room for deviance. There's a lot of room for creativity and to change society, to make society new, right? And we'll see many historical experiences of this. Finally, in this first chapter, you're going to want to look closely at C. Wright Mills's notion of this sociological imagination, that notion that that sociology teaches us to decouple, if you will, to separate what is individual-based behavior, right, personal troubles, and what are social issues. That is, the origin of the problem is in the larger social institutions, social arrangements in society. Uh, and I want you to read that. I've already got a project for you on the discussion board for you to do. So I'm going to stop at this point, and if you've got any questions about Chapter 1, please send those questions to me via email, and I'll be glad to go further and help you understand any area that you feel vague about, that you want more examples, for example, of that particular concept. All right, so I'll be seeing you online. All right, have a good day. Bye.